committee in 2025. I've received apologies this morning from Ruth Maguire, and so can I welcome Rona Mackay, who is attending as committee substitute. Our first agenda item is to deal with some subordinate legislation, the Scottish Parliament Disqualification Order 2025. And I would like to welcome to give evidence Jamie Hepburn, Minister for Parliamentary Business, Kenneth Pentland, Elections Team Scottish Government, Ailsa Kemp, Head of the Parliamentary Liaison Unit, Scottish Government, and Jordan McGorry, Solicitor from the Scottish Government. Minister, would you like to make a short opening statement?
Thank you, Convener. Let me first of all thank you and the committee for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the draft Scottish Parliament Disqualification Order 2025. This order is an established item of business in advance of each and every Scottish Parliament election. Section 15 of the Scotland Act 1998 sets out the circumstances in which a person is disqualified automatically from membership of the Parliament, for example, by virtue of being a judge, civil servant or member of the armed forces. In addition, Section 15 provides an order-making power to disqualify specific office holders from membership of this Parliament, allowing for separation between the legislature and the holders of various public offices. This serves to help reinforce their independence from one another. In preparing the draft order which disqualifies specific office holders, we consulted widely with policy officials and sponsor teams within the Scottish Government and with Parliament officials on the entries for offices supported by the Scottish Parliament corporate body. With the help of officials in the Secretary of State for Scotland's office, we gathered responses from the UK Government and the other devolved nations through devolution leads in each UK department. The draft order before committee today updates the list of disqualified offices to reflect relevant appointments which have been abolished, renamed or indeed created since the making of the 2020 order. A total of 30 new disqualifications were added, 21 were removed and 20 amendments were made to existing disqualified offices. I would highlight that 12 of the amendments were simply reflecting in change of the names of bodies from Her Majesty's to His Majesty's. For example, HMRC has now changed from being Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs to His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. To give you an example of a new addition, we've added the new Patient Safety Commissioner for Scotland following the Parliament's decision to establish the role earlier in this session. Given the Commissioner is supported by the SPCB and is expected to be politically impartial, it is important to ensure an individual is not able to hold that role whilst being an MSP. The list is extensive, given the breadth of the public body landscape across the UK, but members should not see the order as a constraint on the wide talent available to this Parliament, as those in a disqualified office can, of course, opt to step down from such positions and seek to bring their experience to this Parliament if they so wish. As committee will be aware, the order was originally withdrawn and relayed. This followed the DPLRC, highlighting some bodies in the list which had changed name, so were no longer correctly captured. These amounted to, in percentage terms, less than 1% of the overall list, and it's important to recognise that the errors highlighted do not relate to Scottish bodies or office holders, and therefore the chance of having sought to become an MSP are very slim. Regardless, I am grateful to the DPLRC for highlighting these so we could make the necessary corrections in advance of coming to this session. Convener, Ailsa, Jordan and Kenny and I would be very happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And just before I offer questions to any of the committee, I have a couple of questions and reflections myself, which you've already hinted at, in that our sister committee, DPLR, identified some errors in the original, and as you say, it was less than 1% and was rectified. And you did, in your opening statement, talk about the outreach to ensure that the updated list is as accurate as possible. Do you think there are any steps that could be taken just sort of to improve that? Because it seems to be very much requiring others to come in, to be invited to, but others then to come in and feed into this list. Do you have confidence in the oversight that effectively you're part of government holds with regard to the creation of this list?
I mean, broadly speaking, yes. I mean, I would go back to the point I made earlier. It was a very small number that were inaccurately referred to, and the details did not emanate from within this administration. But that's not to pass the buck. Of course, we should try and get these things right. I would reflect, of course, that this is one of the virtues of parliamentary scrutiny, so inevitably DPLRC might pick up on something and we act and make sure that the list is up to date. In terms of our processes going forward, I'm more than willing to hear what any suggestions it might be. For example, one of the differences between how we do it in Westminster is that they have a general, more broad power, whereas we specifically detail office holders. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. I would proffer the suggestion the advantage to the way in which we do it is that it's very clear who is disqualified by comparison to one that sets out the broader terms in which any office might be disqualified. I suppose the downside is you may not capture everyone, or you may get caught up by this mere fact that office holders or various organisations no longer exist. But we're more than willing to consider any alterations that Parliament may care to suggest.
So you're still confident that the specificity that's used in the way that you're approaching this order is in fact the right way to do it, rather than the more general term which potentially leaves questions open of am I or am I not covered, an individual may.
As I say, there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches. I mean, if you're asking my view, I think on balance, I think the approach we take is slightly better. Yes, it's a slightly more onerous process, and yes, it means we're having to constantly revise it because of the points I've just made. But I do think there is the advantage in having quite specific details of who is disqualified.
And do you think there may be an advantage to having a sort of a table or a snapshot within the order to explain what the changes are from the previous one, or are you content that each order in essence sits on its own to take us forward? Because you've given us the figures, the sort of, the total numbers, those that are in, those that are out. It's whether or not you would see an advantage to actually capturing that in a table in the actual order itself so people can see the changes.
I would need to check whether we would be able to do that in the first instance. If we were able to, I could see the advantage in doing it. So if we're not able to, I would suggest there might be another way we could make that clear by way of directing it in terms of other information we make available. I have the list in front of me.
Yes.
It is extensive, so I don't intend to read it out entirely, but there were 30 entries added, 21 removed, and 28 entries are amendments in terms of name and designation and so on. So perhaps it's something we could look at. Yeah. And the fact I have them in front of me would suggest we could do it probably fairly straightforwardly. Whether or not we could specify it in the order, I don't know. I'm happy to take that away and look at it.
I'm fine for that, and I'm more than happy that on the publication of the order that puts us sufficiently enough on the public record to save you having to go through the whole list. And my final question, just before I turn to the committee, is: do you want to explain what the test is that is applied in relation to why disqualification will take place? In essence, you hinted that with obviously the address of the new body, where there's clearly seen as a conflict there. Are you able to articulate? This is not a test. Are you able to articulate, in essence, the test that is applied to decide whether or not a position should be one that fits into the disqualification order?
I can indeed, convener. I should say it's fairly well established and it's well understood and it's been in place for a while. It is broadly consistent with the wider UK approach as well. But the broad criteria for disqualification are those that are offices for profit and the gift of the Crown or ministers. So that would include salaried, pensionable and certain fee-paid posts, but it does exclude post-attracting expenses alone. There is an exemption for offices where the remuneration is less than £10,000 per year. They're not normally disqualified. There are certain positions of control in companies and receipt of government grants and funds, to which ministers usually, though not necessarily, make appointments. There are offices imposing duties with regard to time and place, which prevent their holders from fulfilling parliamentary duties. Effectively, it's felt that they would have too much in their hands. They already have a burden of responsibility that would not really allow them to be a member of the Scottish Parliament. Of course, we're going through the consideration about dual mandates, so it kind of fits into that territory. And there are others where offices whose holders are required to be, or certainly seen to be, politically impartial. So that's the broad criteria which we apply. If there's a question as to whether or not that's comprehensive enough, we're always willing to, or indeed whether it's too encompasses too many people, we're always willing to look at that again.
That's very helpful. I'm grateful, Minister. I don't know whether any other committee members have any questions. Can I come to you, Rona?
Thank you, Convener. Just a tiny question from me, and apologies if I missed this in the detail. When was the list last updated?
It's done in advance of each and every Scottish Parliament election.
Right, okay.
Mackay. So the last one was 2020. 2020.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Any other questions from committee? If not, I'm content to move on to agenda item 2, which is a debate on the motion seeking the committee's agreement to recommend to the Parliament that the Scottish Parliament Disqualification Order 2025 be approved. Can I invite the Minister to move the motion?
Moved, Convener.
Do any members wish to make a contribution? Seeing nothing, then can I put the question that motion S6M 17706 be agreed? Are we all agreed? Yes. Excellent. Our agenda item 3 is the subordinate legislation, the Scottish Parliament Constitution. Sorry, I'll try that again, get it right. The Scottish Parliament Constituencies and Regions Order 2025. Minister, would you like to make a short opening statement on this?
Certainly happy to do so, Convener. Again, I'm very happy to be here to speak to this draft order. This gives effect to the recommendation submitted to me by Boundaries Scotland, and I am legally obliged, have a duty to lay it before Parliament. The draft order defines the name, status and area of 70 Scottish Parliament constituencies. Of course, the 3 protected island constituencies are not part of the review, and also the name and area of each of the 8 Scottish Parliament regions. If subsequently approved by the Scottish Parliament, the new boundaries will be effective at the election scheduled for next year, for the 7th of May 2026, and indeed for all subsequent parliamentary elections until the boundaries are next reviewed. The first review of the Scottish Parliament constituencies and regions reported in 2010, and the resulting boundaries were used in the 2011, 2016 and 2021 Scottish Parliament elections. This is the first national review of the Scottish Parliament's constituencies and regions to be considered by this Parliament itself since the powers were devolved. As the committee heard from the evidence given by Boundaries Scotland, there has been significant change in the population across Scotland since the last review, with some areas experiencing significant increases and others remaining relatively unchanged or indeed falling. There will, of course, be differing opinions on the final recommendations. I recognise that, I understand that, but I am pleased and I do believe that a thorough process was undertaken with several rounds of consultation and 9 local inquiries. I am therefore confident that Boundaries Scotland has discharged their duties competently, completely and professionally in line with the rules prescribed and set out in the Scotland Act. So I hope that's helpful by way of quick opening remarks. Again, I and Kenny, Ailsa and Jordan will be very happy to field any questions you might have.
I'm very grateful for that statement, Minister. Again, I just have a couple of questions, then I'll invite any questions from the committee. And the first in relation is not specifically about this order, but about the evidence that we heard, and whether or not the Minister and indeed the Scottish Government is in agreement with the view that I think this committee indicated in the questioning, that the learning experience of the most recent review should try to be captured in a lessons learned for the next review process, because we heard concerns, or we heard not concerns, we heard challenges about the naming of the different steps in it and the struggle. There were challenges about the inquiries and possibly an indication of a lack of understanding from those who were invited to contribute, i.e. our constituents, to how best affect. So can I invite the Scottish Government maybe to echo that there are clearly lessons that need to be learned, not as a criticism to the process that's already happened, but actually as a step forward, so the next time this will occur, which will happen, perhaps it can build on the lessons learned from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the exercise of any process of substance. I mean, this is a substantial process, and it's initiated in September 2022, and the final report came to me in April, just at the end of April this year, and here we are now discussing the order that's laid before Parliament. It's a substantial exercise, and in the undertaking of such a process, I think it's always sensible to review that, to consider any lessons learned. Some of that may take us into the realms of the need for primary legislation. We've already, in this committee, and it has largely been evidence, this committee has gathered, we've already initiated a process of review around automaticity of approving boundaries. If, and you know, I don't want to get ahead of that process, you wouldn't expect me to get ahead of that process, it's completely independent of government and Parliament, but we will have to look at what is reported in due course, and then Parliament will, I'm sure, take an interest. And if there are changes suggested there, then that would take us into the realms of probably requiring primary legislation. And at that point, it may also be sensible to consider what other changes might we want to make to our process. And again, I say that, as you've caveated it as well, Convener, that's not with any form of criticism. I think Boundary Scotland have discharged their responsibilities very, very well in undertaking this process. But yes, of course we should be willing to learn lessons, not least if Boundary Scotland themselves are flagging issues, then of course we should be willing to listen to that.
That's very helpful. The Minister has mentioned the question of the work that's going on with automaticity. Is the timeline that's sort of being discussed, is the Minister still confident that that's going to be adhered to and the process is where we are? I think just be helpful to get that on the official record.
Yes, my expectation is, and I've discussed this with Mr Kerr, that it should report in autumn, September, October time, and that should give us plenty of time to look at it this session. Not time, of course, to legislate, and let's be clear from the outset, not time to legislate and, on the back of any recommendations this session. So it'll be for Parliament, as it is composed next session, to consider the findings of that report.
That's very helpful. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? No? Excellent. Then I will move to agenda item 4, which is a debate on the motion seeking the committee's agreement to recommend to the Parliament that the Scottish Parliament Constituencies and Regions Order 2025 be approved. Can I invite the Minister to move the motion?
Move, Convener.
Do any members wish to make a contribution? I have no indication of such. So therefore, can I put the question, which is that motion S6M 17707 be agreed? Are we all agreed?
Yes. Agreed.
Yes, excellent. The committee will have to report on the outcome of both of our decisions today in due course. Are members content that we produce one report with regard to both of these instruments that we've considered today, and are you content to delegate authority to approve the draft report to me?
Yes.
Excellent. Can I thank the Minister and those that assist the Minister for his contribution today? He is more than welcome to hear the rest of our public debate, which is on cross-party groups, but similarly, I'm more than happy if the Minister has other things in his diary to thank him for his contribution today. Thank you. The next agenda item is to consider a request from the cross-party group on deafness to change its purpose. Members will see from the note that the convener of the CPG has explained that the group has worked to support people who are deaf and deaf-blind, and that the group now wishes to amend our purpose to reflect our work more accurately and respect the preferred language of all of our members. So, do members have any comments or questions on this? If I can come to you first soon, then I will come to you, Rona.
Sorry. We have a CPG on visual impairment, and I know we have many discussions in this room around CPG's duplication.
Yes.
And so if they are seeking to expand their remit, I'm perhaps considering they may be looking to merge, would be my suggestion.
Okay. Rona. Come to you.
I mean, I'm just listening to what my colleagues said there. My initial reaction is I'm delighted that this is happening. I've got Deafblind Scotland in my constituency, and they're a fantastic organisation. And I think it's, it's good that the dual sensory impairment is recognised. So I'm absolutely for it. The question of merging with visual impairment, I'm not opposed to, but I think for the purposes of this, that we change the definition. I'm absolutely happy about that.
Any other comments from the committee members? So if I pick up on sort of what Sue and I think Rona is suggesting, should we try and seek some more information? Not that we're in any way saying no to this, but to ask what exploration has been made of whether there is an overlap that now occurs, and has a merger been considered, or if not, you know, why it should still stand. But from the point of view that we're in a, when we are absolutely not saying no, we're just concerned about sort of infringement. Is that too strong a word on another CPG's area? Please do, Sue.
If they are, because if they are including the visual impairment, then the people that attend guide dogs, RNIB, there'll be an obligation perhaps for them to now try and attend this further CPG, which puts more pressure on quite small charities and people that are interested. And I know that there's some specific work that the CPG and visual impairment are doing with Stuart McMillan, the convener, and I've been involved with my hat in terms of floating bus stops, and we are aware that, you know, the impacts for deaf people and for those with visual impairments. So I'm really concerned by this expansion when there is someone.
Well then,
I would be recommending a bit more firm convener.
Would the committee be content then for me to write to seek further information on the exploration of the crossover between those two CPGs? And then once we have a response on that, it may well be that we can see where the situation is and make a decision at a later committee. No, please, Rana, come in.
Can I just propose that we are very clear that we're not doubting this or you know, trying to claw back from it, that we are very supportive.
No, absolutely.
Because I mean, Sue makes, my colleague makes a good point, and I agree with it. But I'm worried that perception is that we're saying, oh, you know, not sure that should happen, when I think it absolutely should happen.
No, and I concur with that, because this is in no way predetermining a decision that we're not wanting, but there is a requirement as a committee that we oversee the purposes, and that the purposes of CPG should reflect the work that they're doing. And I'm incredibly grateful to the cross-party group on deafness to have come to us in a positive way about this. I think this is merely an exploration to see, is there an essence of cross-party work that perhaps has not been noted? I'm sure that's not the case, but for an explanation for that, and then absolutely to return. Are we content with that?
Content, yeah.
Excellent. Finally, the members may recall that we considered an update in relation to the CPG's compliance with rules across both January and February this year. In relation to the CPG on shared parenting, we'd indicated that we intended to withdraw recognition from the group on the basis of a failure to comply with the rules in relation to the submission of the required documentation. Following discussions with the convener of the group, Fulton McGregor MSP, and can I thank Fulton for his engagement on this, it was agreed that the CPG could be given an opportunity to catch up with the missing documentation, but that it would be for the committee to indicate whether or not to continue to afford recognition to the group. The group have now provided all of the required documentation, and again can I thank Fulton and those that support him for doing that. But I would now like to invite the committee to decide whether or not it is intent for the group now to continue for the rest of the session because it's in compliance. Are we content with that?
Yes, content.
Excellent, then we're content with that. Then, at that point, I will close this meeting. Thank you.